it is so, you can't say that this is both sides of violence. What we saw was white supremacists, and then what we saw were some brave people risking their lives and putting themselves in between white supremacists and that, and what they were doing. So we saw white supremacists initiate this action, try to bully those people, try to instill fear, and we saw brave people there in Charlottesville standing against them.
But there was a group the president mentioned that we haven't heard about, the alt-left. So who are they? Simply put, the alt-left does not exist. According to the Anti-Defamation League, it's a made-up term that refers to no actual group or organization. Many in the alt-right actually refer to groups when they protest them as Antifa. That refers to anti-fascists. It's a name that some groups have latched onto, borrowing from an old left-wing extreme movement that popped up in the 1960s in Germany. Their goal is to physically confront Nazis and white supremacists.
We are meeting members of the Rose City Antifa, short for anti-fascist. This group's main goal is to disrupt neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but also take on government and capitalism.
Antifa is any group that's willing to stand up against fascists by any means necessary.
By any means necessary, they say, can mean outing a white nationalist at their work or to their neighbors. Or, as we've seen recently, violence, fires, property damage, hand-to-hand combat at protests across the country.
Explain to me the reasoning behind fighting.
You have to make it so unpalatable to be doing white supremacist organizing that they no longer want to do that. And historically, that's what's worked. You have to put your body in the way, and you have to make it speak in a language that they understand, and sometimes that is violence.
No, they are strictly principled anti-fascists. And what they see in the Trump administration and what they see happening in this country, they see the neo-fascism that we see. And they've taken a principled stand to stand against white supremacists and white nationalists wherever they may show up. I'd like to point out that Antifa at Charlottesville protected peaceful protesters. I don't know what President Trump was talking about.
Well, who were waving the clubs on that side? I mean, I looked at pictures that people were jumping
themselves.
in. Well, there was one group that was jumping in and punching the Nazi types. I've seen pictures from. I've seen a lot of pictures like you have, and I've seen people reaching and then slugging them. Who were those people?
But they may have been part of Antifa.
I thought they're opposed to globalization as well.
I couldn't say. I'm not an expert on Antifas.
I'm not an expert on Antifas. I'm not an expert on Antifas.
This is CNN, home of fake news.
To equate a group that is a protest group, two protest groups, yes, they're both protest groups, and they're talking about Antifa or Antifa, however you want to pronounce it, calling them the alt-left. Well, that group protests fascism, so they were there protesting fascism. Maybe their tactics weren't exactly right. All groups like that, political groups, rights groups, protest groups, it's messy.
Antifa are people who go and they try to push back on these guys. Sometimes they go too far. I think that is a significant issue. But it is not the case that they are going around building an armed movement to go and kill people.
So, thank you, CNN, for having the balls as a media organization to do something that Antifa would do.
So, Snopes has come forward, much like Colbert and CNN, to argue that Antifa isn't that bad, that the alt-right is more violent. Well, their phrasing in this article is Antifa and the alt-right aren't equally violent, which they would be right, but not for the reason that they think they are. Antifa is far more violent than the alt-right. They have shown up to protest after protest, justifying violence against random people by saying this person's a Nazi, and backing it up with almost no evidence, if any at all.
He's not only unfit to be president. In my book, his lack of empathy, his lack of leadership, his lack of courage, he's unfit to be human.
I've rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. From the time I'm 5 years old, I rejected them.
What do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
I'm David Duke, and this is a quick, unscripted response to the CNN interview today with Donald Trump. I can begin by the inaccurate reporting of the media that I have endorsed Donald Trump. Specifically, I have said clearly, and every time I've talked about his candidacy, that I am not endorsing Donald Trump.
Even if you don't know about their endorsement, there are these groups and individuals endorsing you.
I mean, I don't know what group you're talking about.
Number one, you disavowed David Duke 2 days prior.
If he said on Friday, I disavow, why ask him again on Saturday?
Why not disavow David Duke, disavow the KKK? What's going on?
I'm saying to myself, how many times do I have to continue to disavow people? And the question was asked about David Duke and various groups. And I don't know who the groups are. I disavowed David Duke, and I disavowed him the day before at a major news conference, which is surprising because CNN was at the major news conference, and they heard me very easily disavow David Duke. I disavowed David Duke all weekend long on Facebook, on Twitter, and obviously it's never enough.
How would you characterize in more words than one David Duke?
David Duke is a bad person who I disavowed on numerous occasions over the years.
I will not stop until we fight a man that chooses not to disavow the KKK. That is not a part of our party. That's not who we want as president. We will not allow that in our country.
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke.
And talk about the groups. The green and black flag that was seen at the Charlottesville event is the Kekistani flag. Kekistan is a fake country. The flag mimics a German Nazi war flag.
And at the heart of all of this, there are some anti-fascist movements who, under the banner of a good cause, contain a sort of unholy alliance of bad guys. Stop the War is a group that was comparing British jihadists who were going to Syria to fight as anti-fascists, comparing them to the anti-fascists who went to fight in Spain in the 1930s, when anybody with half a brain knows that jihadists are the true fascists. And then we have a kind of collection of anti-capitalists who just want civil unrest. On the day of the Queen's speech, when Theresa May was under a hung parliament, a group called Justice by Any Means Necessary advocated a day of rage in the UK, where people were told to take to the streets to kind of cause civil unrest, which of course echoes what's been happening in America, in Berkeley. You know, we're seeing kind of gangs in black shirts violently assaulting and kind of stopping people talking who disagree with them. Now, by any modus operandi that we see through the prism of history, this is fascism. This is a new intolerance.
Exactly.